"Don't look at me that way," she said. And I was like, "What?" I had just had a miscarriage a few days before and was trying to get my blood work done. And yes, I did show up at the lab right as they were closing. And I said to the lab tech as she was leaving, "Oh, did I miss it?" "Yes," she said. And I was trying to unbuckle my son from the car. And then she said, "Don't look at me like that." And I was like, I'm not upset. I wasn't getting mad at you." "Yes, you are," she sneered. And then she walked off. And it was one of those moments where you think, am I in a parallel universe right now? What is happening? Now, as somebody who was an emergency nurse and worked for almost a decade, I understand getting tired after a shift. I really get it. We all have bad days. And I actually ended up working with this lady years later. She didn't even remember, of course, and I wasn't like, I'm going to bring it up. And it is okay. That was actually 2 decades ago now. But that memory came to mind. And it made me start thinking. So why do people think we were getting meaner? Well, I was doing my emerge nurse training and we had a whole section on stress and human behavior. Tired, overwhelmed people, we often will misread tone and intent. Thinking is hard, and I 100% can relate to that. So for good reason, even though neutral interactions can feel hostile when somebody is already overloaded, it's not an excuse. It's just a reason. Everyone is just one inconvenience away from tears or yelling or both. And some days it's a coin toss. Now, in past movies and media, they have led us to believe that everyone was very polite back then. Hellos and thank yous, holding doors, etc. No one was late, no one was hungry, and no one had toddlers. Recently, my son held the door open for somebody who just walked right through without a thank you, not even a nod, not even a fake cough of gratitude. And it is surprisingly common, but is it new? So grab your tea and let's dive in. So what has changed in this current era? Well, we are continuing to get more and more isolated. We tend to be way less community oriented. And I personally keep saying to my pastor that we need like a weekly potluck. And that might be a little bit much, but I am craving community and to try multiple variations of pie. Please let there be blueberry. This is not a metaphor. I actually want pie. There's also so much more self-protection. We were never meant to be exposed to so much world news, violence, and opinion, and it used to just be you and your little community. Community dependence has changed massively. Before modern systems, families were a lot larger, and communities were tighter. Institutions were smaller and more local. Plus, people saw the same people repeatedly, day after day, often doing the same old things, and reputation mattered. When social consequences are local and ongoing, people self-regulate their behavior a lot more carefully. Now today, anonymity is higher, mobility is higher, and social consequences are diffuse. Think of your favorite keyboard warriors or trolls. Now this does not make people worse, it just makes us less constrained. So sure, back in the day, you did not like Mary Sue. She had that perfect casserole and she always gave you the side eye in the market. But she was just one person that you encountered occasionally. Even if you saw her once a day, that's nothing compared to now. But now, it's like there are thousands of Mary Sues and she has Wi-Fi now. We see far more human behavior than any time in history. Now before, you saw maybe dozens of people a day. You heard local gossip occasionally, and now thousands of opinions per day, hundreds of emotional signals, probably more than that, and constant exposure to conflict. Even conservative estimates suggest that we are exposed to thousands of micro opinions daily through headlines and comments, videos, and algorithms. We accidentally see people being executed or other grim things, and that is not normal for people. My brain did not sign up for this level of information, and everything is a rush. We're in a hurry for school pickups, rushing children, road rage is off the hook. Like, chill out here, people. No one has ever arrived calmer because they were aggressive in traffic. There is so much detachment now and dehumanizing behavior. We see a car and not a person in a car. And we might just have received bad news, which, as a side note, aggressive driving, things like excessive speeding, tailgating, weaving through traffic contribute to more than half of fatal crashes in the US right now. That's not just bad manners, That's dangerous behavior that can cost lives. And nearly half of all drivers say that they have noticed more of this since the pandemic. When I nursed in the ER, I saw people getting devastating news a lot, and then they had to drive home after that. Plus, overcrowded ERs don't exactly produce calm people. Fear plus lack of control escalates behavior. Stress narrows our thinking and our patience. And on top of that, chronic stress dysregulates the nervous system. I'm not going to really get into the long-term risks of stress as I have before, but it's not good. Increased risk of cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular events, and more. But more to my point, dysregulated people struggle to act kind. The higher stress levels, the lower reasoning gets. Just think about that. This increases the risk of a blowout. And sadly, right now, I think politics in particular seems to be driving a huge wedge between two very distinct sides of polarity in the Western world. And this divide has always existed. But social media and video are only making things worse right now. As an aside, this channel will never be political. I just want to play in my garden and not get flustered about the state of the world. What is that meanness epidemic taking over? Were people kinder before? And let's talk about historical norms of politeness. Now, in many Western societies, politeness used to be more formal, more scripted, more rule-based. Think manners, titles, restraint in public. But politeness does not equal kindness. A lot of historical niceness was about social order, avoiding shame, and knowing your place. People behaved politely because it was expected and not necessarily because they felt emotionally regulated or compassionate. An important insight is that politeness was often compliance and not care. Kindness is quiet, and meanness can be loud, shareable, and sticky. And historically, people relied on each other more for food, like can I borrow a cup of sugar, childcare, safety, labor. Remember in the days when people said it takes a village to raise a child? Back when I was little, I remember being at my grandpa's house and going to the neighbor behind the house, looking for my mom, and it was just normal. That was just normal behavior. My cat is being silly. Now, if your neighbor talked to your kid, you might freak out and be like, what? That is if you let your kid out of the house at all. Cooperation was not optional, it was survival. And on this channel, often I talk about like borrowing and lending things instead of owning everything. But that's just not the world we live in right now. What's great about that old way is that creates mutual dependence, enforced civility, collective responsibility, community. When you need your neighbor, you behave differently towards them. But modern life has reduced that dependence, so cooperation feels optional instead of necessary. And there were many, many people that were excluded from the niceness, though. Racial groups, women, the poor, disabled, and so many more that I am sure I am missing. And many people experience politeness on the surface, but there was actually cruelty underneath. Think about Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life. Now, I know he wasn't exactly nice on the surface, but there was a lot of cruelty underneath him. So when we say people are kinder, we often mean some people were treated better if they fit the norm. I'm sorry, my cat is just having so much fun playing right now. And that is why nostalgia can feel comforting, but incomplete. So let's talk about nostalgia versus truth. Psychology shows that we actually remember the past as simpler and kinder than it was. Although I'm going to be honest with you, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and there was not much of an internet for most of the 90s. Anyway, except for me, I often remember every embarrassing moment and bad parenting mistake. Selective memory, but not selective enough. But our brains smooth out conflict over time. We are wearing John Lennon-style rose-colored glasses, and stress makes the present feel harsher by comparison every single time. And this is actually called rosy retrospection. And that brings me to an important reframe. It's not that the past was kinder, it's that the present is louder, faster, and more visible. So back then, people would say, how do you do? Instead of hi, or good day to you, or after you. And people would address each other as Mr., Mrs., Miss, and Sir. I'm reading this series, and it's called Agatha Raisin, and everybody introduces each other as Mr. and Mrs. It originally came out in the 80s. The lady who wrote it was probably born in like the 20s or something. But it's so interesting to see how things have changed just with that. So are we meaner? I actually don't think we are. I think we notice meanness more. Psychology shows that we remember negative interactions far more strongly than neutral or kind ones, which makes sense because if you were like, hey, that big fuzzy thing, a bear, was really mean and scared me and chased me last time, that is going to help protect you. The niceness, you don't need to remember as much. Unfortunately though, rudeness sticks. Quiet kindness fades. One person walking through a door without saying thank you can live rent-free in your brain for days, while dozens of perfectly normal, decent interactions around it disappear almost immediately, and modern life makes that bias worse. Algorithms amplify conflict and not cooperation, and anger spreads faster than calm. Outrage is louder than decency, so the data we see is skewed. It feels worse, and not because people are worse, but because we're being shown the sharpest edges of humanity on repeat. Here's something grounding though. When you zoom out historically, large-scale violence, murder rates, and death from war per capita are far lower now than most of human history. Even compared to the early 1900s, many forms of everyday violence in Western countries are down. So while it feels worse, this is statistically speaking one of the safest times to be alive. And there's another piece of evidence that gives me a lot of hope. In real crisis, people don't become cruel, they become cooperative. And disaster research consistently shows that when things truly fall apart, like floods and fires and hurricanes, power outages, people overwhelmingly support and help each other. Mutual aid increases. Strangers share food, shelter, and resources. And what's interesting is that in moments that really matter, humans tend to show up. And that really matches what I've experienced in my own life. Whenever I step into real community and not performative, not even online, I feel calmer and fuller, more connected, especially when there is food involved. So I don't think humanity is deteriorating. I think we're overstimulated, we're overexposed, and we're seeing so much more of each other than we were ever meant to. And it's almost like there's either the highlight reel or the super negative reel. And from a nervous system perspective, that matters. When people are chronically stressed, tired, and flooded with information, patience drops and misinterpretation rises. Neutral interactions start to feel hostile, small moments escalate, and that does not mean people are bad. It means they are dysregulated. If the world feels sharper right now, you're not imagining it. But that does not mean kindness is disappearing. It means it's quieter than conflict and harder to notice when we're overwhelmed. And the good is still out there. It just doesn't shout. And I shared a much more personal story recently about why I left nursing right here, how stress quietly reshaped my life. And I think you might find it so grounding and so informative, and I'd love for you to watch it. I hope something great happens for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.